Is it a good letter, or is it too short? Yes, indeed, a very good letter, replied Emma, rather slowly. So good a letter, Harriet, that everything considered, I think one of his sisters must have helped him. I can hardly imagine the young man whom I saw talking to you the other day could express himself so well, if left quite to his own powers. And yet it is not the style of a woman. No, certainly, it is too strong and too concise, not diffuse enough for a woman. No doubt he is a sensible man, and I suppose he may have a natural talent for thinks strongly and clearly, and when he takes a pen in hand, his thoughts naturally find proper words. It is so with some men. Yes, I understand the sort of mind. Vigorous, decided, with sentiments to a certain point, not coarse. A better written letter, Harriet, returning it, than I had expected. Well, said the still waiting Harriet. Well, and what should I do? What should you do? In what respect? Do you mean with regard to this letter? Yes. But what are you in doubt of? You must answer it, of course, and speedily. Yes, but what shall I say? she cried, looking aghast. No, to be sure you could not. I never thought of that before. That would have been too dreadful. What an escape! Dim as Woodhouse, I would not give up the pleasure and honour of being intimate with you for anything in the world. Indeed, Harriet, it would have been a severe pang to lose you, but it must have been. You would have thrown yourself out of all good society. I must have given you up. Dear me! How should I ever have